So welcome, everyone. I just watched the movie The Ice Cream Sellers. I hope you've had a chance to watch it. It's an absolutely fantastic, really eye-opening, really unflinching view of the Cox's Bazar refugees. And I'm here today with Sohel Rahman, the filmmaker, to have a Q&A and discussion. I'll ask him a few questions, but hopefully we can get a lot more questions from the audience. So to introduce myself, I'm Neela Saldanha, and I'm the Executive Director of the Yale Research Initiative on Innovation and Scale. That's YRISE. And the Faculty Director of YRISE is Professor Mushfiq Mubarak in the Economics Department. At YRISE, we look at advancing the science of scaling, development and policy interventions. And humanitarian issues such as refugee and conflict areas is always important because in some ways, unlike regular, poverty, I shouldn't say regular, but really about, ongoing and chronic poverty issues, humanitarian crisis can often exacerbate what's going on, as in the case of COVID-19. The world goes out of gear. We've seen that with any emergency. So it's even worse when you have a humanitarian crisis. What I think is actually depressing, but also familiar about crises such as the Rohingya crisis is that it is also a chronic, long-standing problem. We'll talk a little bit about that in the Q&A. It's my great pleasure to welcome Sohel Rahman. Sohel is an award-winning filmmaker, writer, and producer. He's currently based in Lisbon, Portugal. His films have been screened internationally in various film festivals and universities around the world. Sohel received the Best Feature Documentary Film Award from the South Asian Film Festival of Montreal, Canada in 2021, and from Tasveer South Asian Film Festival, Seattle in 2021 for this film, The Ice Cream Sellers. He also received the Best Film Award from Lusofona University, Lisbon in 2015 for his film A Passagem. In the same year, he won the Special Jury Award at the Encontros International Cinema at the Vienna Film Festival in Portugal. Born in Chittagong, Bangladesh, Sohel's love of visual art, literature, and storytelling drew him to filmmaking early in life. He teaches film in different universities and institutes in Portugal and Bangladesh as an invited filmmaker. He's the director and chief organizer of Mostra de Cinema Sul Asiático, Lisbon, Portugal. So welcome, Sohel. It's really an honor to have you here talking about your film.
Thank you so much, Neela. It's an honor to have me here and it's my presence and screen my film here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I know we have fewer members of the audience here, but I'd really like to start with a question around where is everybody really coming from? So, but if I ask you where you're coming from, you're going to say New Haven. So I really want to know, first of all, where are members of the audience? Where did you actually grow up? What were your experiences? So if you can put into the chat, into the Zoom chat we currently have, which country you grew up in. If there were multiple countries you grew up in, put all of them down. I think it'll give us a sense of what experiences our audience has had, because our experiences inform how we look at things like, like Rohingya, etc. So, I'd love to know where you actually came from. So put in your answers in the chat and let's see what shows up in the map. So I'm going to start. I will put in my answer. I grew up in India. I think, Sohel, you grew up in, so you can see that's me, grew up in India. You don't have to raise your hand, just put your answers down, just type out your answers in the chat. Shanghai, it's good to know. Turkey, Denmark, USA, New York State. So it's good to know. I think we've got people. And the reason I think this is important is because where we grew up and where we spend our lives influences and provides us a lens also into the world, I think. So so it's nice to know that folks have really come from all over the world. And I'd really like to know also, have you watched the movie yet? Because if not, I think Sohel can give a little bit of an introduction to the movie, and I really hope you'll watch it. I spent I didn't even realize an hour and 15 minutes, and I had to sit in silence after that for the next, I think, 10 or 15 minutes, because no matter how much you read about something, I think it's when you watch the everyday lives of people who are going through that particular situation, you can really sort of understand what's happening. So again, if you can just let me know maybe just put in the Q&A whether you've watched the movie, The Ice Cream Sellers. Let me just actually share my screen. Let me move this one. Let me do this poll then. Okay. So there are three, just type 1, 2, or 3. Like, have you watched the movie? If you've seen the whole movie, if you've only partly seen the movie, you started watching 10 minutes and then you stopped, or if you haven't watched it at all, just put in 1, 2, or 3 on the chat. Great, Dean. Yes, it was really eye-opening, I think. So yeah, that's great. So some of you watched it partly, I think. Yeah, looks like people have watched it, Sohel. And even though this is a relatively small group, it's good to see. Yeah. So it looks like a lot of you have watched the movie. It's not long for the ones who said partly or those who say no. It's just an hour and 15 minutes. And I think it's absolutely worth watching. I didn't even do what I normally do, which is to put this on 1.25 speed or 1.5 speed, because I think it's really not just the film itself, but the silences and some of the scenes that are worth actually taking in and reflecting on. So I actually hope that everybody has actually sort of watched the movie or ends up watching it as a result of our discussion today and questions that you might have and so on. So for those of you who've actually watched the movie, what sort of, again, you can put in the chat, what sort of words would you use to describe? And this is, I think, Sohel was looking for some feedback on the movie. So my quick question before we start, and I ask him, what sort of words would you use to describe The Ice Cream Sellers? You can just put it in the chat. 4 or 5 of you who have watched the movie. Yeah, I think that was true. It was very moving. I felt the same way. Any other? Unfair. That's very interesting. And maybe I'll call on you to talk about that a little bit. Just any words that come to mind. I know a lot of words came to mind. Not all of them can be repeated, because like you, I found it unfair, and it made me angry a bit to see, to see the unfairness. But any other words that, for those of you who watched the movie, I know someone said it was a great experience. Playful, that's interesting. Yes, I think I got a sense of that as well. And maybe we'll probe a little bit with Sohel in that. Candid, evocative. Yes, I think the games and toys really led to that. And so it's kind of an unusual combination. I agree with sort of the general sentiment here, that not only was it moving, but it was also moving because it was playful and because of the games and toys. So, in some ways, and we'll talk a little bit about that, what led Sohel to make this kind of movie and this particular lens on things that we have. But yeah, thank you very much. And, I'll sort of stop sharing and get to I hope that was good, and you sort of saw a sense of Sohail, even a sense of what the audience took away from the movie, which is what I took away from the movie. This sort of sense of both being moving and playful, of being um, astounded is a good word, I think. Astounded by both the resilience, but the matter of factness really came out to me as well, which is that often when people have suffered so much, uh, there is just no way to describe, the reaction other than being completely matter of fact about it. And if you actually mute the sound and you just listen to them, you wouldn't think that they were talking about, their husbands or their sons or their daughters being killed or raped or mutilated. You just think they were talking about everyday things. And I don't know whether that was, for me, that was even more sort of moving than if that had been drama. But I want to come to sort of this question of what motivated you to make this film and this particular angle of using the children and using those elements of joy and playfulness in the middle of this terrible, portraying this atrocity, Sohail.
Okay, thank you, Neela, for giving me a chance to explain. And thank you all audience who participated in chatting and also saying this feedback. It's great to hear from all of you. Well, first of all, when it started happening in 2017, my mom was calling me all the time. Every day was like, what's happening here in the Naf River? Because I'm from Chittagong and it's not far from the refugee camp. So in Bangladesh, it's a few hours from my hometown to the refugee camp. And all of our people from the country, Bangladeshi people, they went there to help whatever they had. They extended help, like whoever needed some water or for some food or anything, whatever they had. And my mom was saying like, oh, what are you doing? You have to do something for them. And I felt like, yeah, I have to do something and what I can do. So I was following up the news, what's really happening. And one picture just touched my heart. It just broke my heart. A mother, she was carrying two children on her shoulder and running fast towards the border. So it's like my mother doesn't belong to the Rohingya, but what would have happened if she would, if she did? Then I just imagine a situation that is my mom and carrying two of me and my siblings and also running towards border, and I can't imagine that. I just felt like, okay, so I have to do something as a human, as a filmmaker. So I flew from Lisbon to Chittagong, and I went to that refugee camp and started filming. So first of all, I was like a little bit lost because there's too much for someone to endure all those happening, all those suffering. Or you see the people, wounded people, women, and is a cry and traumatized. They almost lost everything, like even the sense and normal sensibility. So when they were talking, they feel like talking. They were narrating, they were describing a killing, like they have breakfast, like they are talking about the breakfast, they're talking something like usual things. This, I saw this, that they lost this is a, then I was kind of distracted with the storytelling because I cannot just shoot randomly. So I need a story to tell, and I just felt like, no, I have to tell this story because I have this access and I know the dialect, what they speak, and it's very, very essential for a filmmaker. When you go there and you cannot just tell their story if you don't have the access, if you don't have the same language or same empathy or the suffering or pain. And in that case, I first couple of days I spent for my research, like, okay, what would be my film? What would be my story? And I didn't want to make a conventional refugee film. I know that there are a lot of film and everybody understands this. Okay, it's a cry, it's a suffering. So what else we need? And I just decided, okay, my theme of the film would be something like after this massive massacre, bloodshed, after all this losing their country, their homeland, their loved one, so a community, how they can really survive as a human. So I just saw everywhere there are children. And on every street of the tiny little path, you see children, and children are children wherever they are. Still they have this irrepressible, the spirit, laughter, happiness, even though they weakness, they saw everything, but still they have this spirit of children, and they are trying to uh, make their childhood. They're trying to create their own childhood wherever they are. And then I was like, okay, so maybe it would be nice to have the perspective through the, like a post-genocide period, through the eyes of children. How? Because those children, they are hope, they are dream, they are the power for this community. That's what I felt. Then I started like, okay, this is the story. Then I needed to find out someone like to carry, to guide me, to lead the storyline, the spine of the story. Then through several encounter, I found Ayas and Asya, these little siblings, and I asked them, what are you doing? And having ice cream. Then, oh, okay, so you are selling ice cream. Why are you selling ice cream? Because we need to make money. Why you need to make money? Then they said, okay, I have to give this money to my mom. And what are your mom, what she's going to do with this money? Because our father is in prison in Myanmar, and if we send some bribe money to the officials in Myanmar in prison so that our father can get released. So this is their hope. And they keep trying every day. This is such a huge work. It's very hard. Even I was with my camera, I was getting tired. It's so dusty, so hot. The camp is never-ending village. Like you keep walking, and you just need. And I was amazed. I was like, oh my God, how the power these kids have. They are incredible. Those, so they just moved me, and then I choose these children to go on with this. And I asked them if they allow me to film, and I said, you don't have to do anything. You just let me know to film you, to follow you. That's it I need. So every day they go, I go with them, and they stop one door, another door, I stop, and I face several people, and I encounter those people, and they tell me the story. There are several testimonies. So I didn't put everything in the film, and I tried. It's very hard also in the post-production time, because which one is more important? Which one is like, I have to make a balance, because it's so heavy things, and I can't deal with this with heaviness. I needed to make it a bit lighter. And I see this is the one hand. On one hand, we have harrowing tale of parents. On the other hand, the children, their laughter, their joy. So that's what, yeah. Sorry.
That's fantastic, and I think that I just want to call attention to one thing that you said, which I think is so true. So this movie hit particularly hard for me because in a previous life I worked with Unilever, which sells ice creams. Quality Waltz is one of the brands, and I was actually responsible for ice cream sales in a part of North India. And I think what you said is completely true about it's very hard work. One of the things that I was just thinking about is also, if you don't sell the ice creams enough, they melt. So this is not a product like selling chips or selling, something which will last for the next day. You have to sell what you started at the beginning of the day by the end of the day. Otherwise, it's useless. And I'm sure the person that they are buying the ice creams from will charge them if, they have unsold ice cream. So it's also a very, holding that box. I was really wondering how the little boy was actually sort of holding the box and going around so easily. It's heavy, and it's it's insulated, and it's very hard work, and yet they seem to do it very matter of factly. So, and I do think that what you said came through very clearly in terms of the joyfulness and the playfulness contrasted, with the subject being so heavy. And I noticed that you used that in a number of places. But before that, there's a very interesting question from CC Young, which is, hi, Sohel, your documentary is really powerful. Can you give us a bit of background about the meaning of ice cream and ice in the area where you shot the documentary? Especially there was a lot of imagery about people taking shower baths, bucket baths, washing their bodies with water. So was there something there that connected it, or how did you get on, the story of the kid selling ice cream? We saw a lot of other vendors. Someone was selling earrings, someone was selling balloons. Of course, they're adult vendors, but how did you get into, was there anything specific about the ice cream, or just it was just one of those?
Well, this when I was working, I was filming. Thanks for the question. It's very interesting question, and I would love to talk about this because it was very hot, and they don't have any power, any electricity, and they don't have any fridge, any cold water. And I was sweating, even me when I was with the film, with the camera, and everybody is very the shelter of the is not a home, but the shelter of the refugee camp, in the camp. So it's very dusty and hot. So they don't have any cold water, anything. Even also they're not surrounded by trees or green
Correct.
things. Now it's growing these days, but when I was filming, it's right after the genocide. It's very new, very fresh. That time I just felt like, wow, this ice cream, these kids, they are not just selling ice cream. It's something they are putting a little piece of cold water is like a piece, giving them peace in that heart, in that burning fire. So you give a little water, like they needed something. So is that's why these kids bringing the hope through this ice cream. They have nothing but they offer you something, and that's a piece of ice cream. But that's a metaphor, that box that they hold on the shoulder, they hold their lives there, like taking that, that's moved me a lot. So I tried several titles for the film, but then I was like, no, I wanted to make it simple and short, so I choose Ice Cream Sellers as a title of the film.
Yeah.
And
and I think that's your film. It's simple on the surface, but it's got a lot of layers once you sort of unpeel the surface. It seems like a simple tale. And I did notice that at the beginning of the film, you have this very lush sort of green, as they're fleeing. I think there's a shot of very lush green fields. And then when I saw the camp, you're right, it's very dusty. In fact, halfway through, I realized there's not even a single tree in this camp. It's just all like dust, and it's brown baked. And it just brought me to mind of, how it's not just about being in a refugee camp, which is hard enough, but it's where you actually are. To be just stripped of nature in such a difficult situation must just add to the difficulties. One thing I noticed, Sohel, in the movie, which really struck me, was that in this temporary area of temporary living, people maintain such good rules. So halfway through, I was wondering, there are two little kids taking ice creams. Anyone can just sort of snatch their ice cream box, right, or not pay for the ice creams. And yet every transaction, people haggle like they bargain in any market. The kid says, I won't get my profit if I sell so many. It was a very normal interaction. It wasn't, what we often think about in conflict situations, which is that people will lose all sense of, what day-to-day interactions look like. So it looked like a normal market transaction if you hadn't told me that it was in a refugee camp. Can you say something from your experience with filming in terms of this kind of observation, in terms of rules of the camp or rules of interaction during this time of, was it surprising? Was it, no, actually, it's not surprising, because when a group of people get together and they've been living somewhere for 5 years, maybe they need to have certain rules, otherwise the whole thing will degenerate into chaos. But, what was surprising to you about the situation that you were not expecting when you went into making the film?
There are lots of things, and I think every day when I go to the camp to shoot, and it's because most of the people, they don't have any cash money, and the rice they received from the international aid organization, so they get it every day or in a week or somehow, and they have this collection of rice. So, but that's also important, and they are waiting. Everybody they have nothing to do, just traumatized. That's like exhausted with the weight of trauma, and then they exchange this with the rice. But you know, they are on one side they lost everything, and they are sensibility, they are sympathy. It's a fluctuated. It's like, okay, I saw everything, all the horrible things happened to me before my eyes. I saw my son got killed. I saw so many. How come I can survive anymore? They lost the normal sensibility. So every day when I go to the camp to film, then I see, I beg, I can't sleep anymore, because especially the mother who was at the end, you saw she was crying like she couldn't control anymore, and she was hugging the tree, and she thought I look like I resemble her son. And it was very heartbreaking. I couldn't really control even my camera. I was asking myself, should I roll my camera or should I just give her a hug? I wanted to give her a hug, but you know, this also, there is a cultural problem. Like, you cannot hug a woman like in that corner of the world. Somehow, if you are a stranger, but it's like it feels. My heart is burning. Was burning when I was encountering, was interviewing her. It's not interview. I just ask her what's the story, and then, and also every day I meet them is not. I didn't keep a profile as a filmmaker. I went there, I didn't use any crew member. I was alone with a little camera, with a Canon 5D Mark II. And I put a microphone on the camera, so I didn't, so people are not afraid, and they don't have any pressure to impress me. To like, okay, this is for the television, for the film. No. So it was very natural, and I wanted to go under the surface. I wanted to feel their pain in my camera, and also personally. And it's a shocking every day. I couldn't sleep for a long time, and I was also having tough time. Then it was those kids, they were a massive source of inspiration for me. And I learned from them. Wow, they are doing this, and I have to keep going. Even in life, we have so many trouble happens, but look at these kids, they have nothing, but they're still laughing, they're still moving forward. So I get inspired out of their work, how they live there every day. And there are several characters. One guy who was selling something, I think vegetables, and he sold everything, and he tried to buy some balloons for his kids.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't afford that. He tried to bargain something, and he couldn't afford. And the balloon sellers, they are also tough, because they are also selling balloons, and is also, they have to buy it with the money. They don't have enough money to be kind to this guy, and they are also very harsh, and they're just like, no, we cannot make it for you, and they are gone. And this guy is just waiting and just looking to the balloon. I was like, oh my God. And he came and he was counting the money. And so every day there are other women who was saying how they got raped, the wounds, but it's too much for the audience, for international audience to show this. But personally, it was very shocking for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say it's too much for the international audience to be seen, to be shown, right? Because it is actually reality, and here we are actually saying, well, reality might be too harsh for those of us who are fortunate and lucky to escape that reality. So in some ways it's actually worse than, I hear you saying, it's much worse than what can be shown and what has been shown. And I do want to make a point about what you talked about, which is the resilience. I noticed that scene as well, and it was striking for for two reasons. One is, as you said, like a normal market transaction, you might work very hard and then not be able to afford something, right? We see this issue with deprivation all the time. Those of us who are fortunate enough, we still feel deprived with, I can't afford this particular thing. But it's even worse. And it's probably even more, exacerbated in a conflict and humanitarian situation, because you've really lost everything. And time again, there were people in the film who talked about how much they had lost. And really, that and there was the scene, I think, right after that, where the person says, we should just buy balloons for the children, because they should just be happy.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, because in normal situations we teach children to wait for things and to sort of have self control. But in this situation, how can you really deny whatever little happiness you get when life is uncertain? I do think there was another scene similarly where someone said, "We just pretend we're on holiday in this camp because we don't want to believe that this is reality." And it's really, there is a lot of work to be done, I think, to understand mental health consequences and how people cope with this kind of situation, because it's not just a situation of loss, it's a situation of uncertainty. And we know that in times of uncertainty, people cope in very different ways. So just as we're discussing, what is it that we need to know, I think that certainly there were a few places that I felt, oh, we should really understand what the consequences of being in the camp are. The uncertainty, sort of idea that I lost something. At the end of the movie, you talked about sort of the current situation. When exactly did you film this? Because you talked about COVID-19 actually impacting the situation. Can you talk a little bit about that? And if you've gone back or heard anything since then, what the situation has been like.
Okay, so I filmed right after the genocide when they're coming. So it was in 2017. So I kept in touch, but after filming I was there for 3 months. Then I came back to Portugal, and I was editing. But when in my post-production time, I had to put this. Okay, the latest situation was really happening, and then we see. And the trial in the International Court of Justice, ICJ, in The Hague, then also this COVID happening, then there was no hope. And I was still in contact with them. What's happening? Your father is back? No. And there is no hope. And slowly they were getting out of the headline, and there are no more headline. And nobody is talking about that. So now is terrible. What's is also hard for me to have the access, because there is no mobile phone, no network inside the camp. So I couldn't really continue keep in touch with them. But I know some of my friends who are working there, and also some of the refugee Rohingya people. So I'm in touch with them, and I'm asking what's really happening, and they keep me updated about the situation, which is really is also shocking, because every day is getting less. They don't have any more right of education, so they don't really. Before there was some sort of education, and now it's getting more worse, and so the aid is getting less every day. There is no education, and also the people, they are getting more desperate, so they are escaping from the camp by illegal way. So sometimes we see the news, and they died in the river because they were trying to escape. They were trying to go somewhere, Indonesia or Malaysia or India, and it's horrible. And then know that what's really consequences coming for in their life, but they don't care. And they said, like, what else we have to do? Because when I was filming, I couldn't put every statement, every testimony, but there were people who are dreaming that one day we go back and I get married. One day we go, like the children, where they're saying what's happening with the mango trees. And that's another shocking scene for me. Like when the children, I was filming something else, and suddenly I saw them. They're having this. The situation is they had hope. Even after the genocide, when they came, and they were still expecting they will go back, international community will help, and to secure their basic human rights, and also to citizenship rights, to go back there, and before the repatriation. So there was sometimes there was something like one time I remember through the UN, they tried to make a repatriation for a small amount of people, but they said we prefer to get buried with funeral rather than going there and killed and get buried. And if we stay here, we get funeral. If you go there, we would not get that. So that's very, they care about these things. And the things what's happening in Myanmar right now also not very pleasing, and is also still ongoing genocide. Yesterday I saw a video clip from a Rohingya person. He was also saying like, look, we are not happy. We are in here stuck in the Mongju, the region in the Rakhine state, and is still another ongoing genocide. So international community, he was asking to give some attention to them and try to help them.
Yeah, and I do want to add here that neither Sohel nor I are experts in international or humanitarian law, but on March 21st, 2022, following a rigorous factual and legal analysis, the Secretary of State of the United States determined that members of the Burmese military committed genocide and crimes against humanity against the Rohingya. And the United States has concluded only 7 other times since the Holocaust that genocide was committed. So this determination was the 8th. So there are various, terms that are used and various ways to classify atrocities against humanity. But just wanted to put that out there. I think one of the related questions Paul Sarno asked is, do the camp residents know about the lawsuit before the ICJ and all the other suits? What are they aware of, taking from Paul's question, what are they actually aware of what the outside world is thinking or doing in this regard?
Well, some people know, some people following that, but most of the people that didn't have proper education or academic education for a long time, because it's a slow poisoning. For a long time, when the Myanmar government taken out these the citizenship right, and they didn't have access to the school, maybe they finished primary school or elementary school, then they didn't have access to the university, so they couldn't really continue their education. So what's really happening? Most of them are either fishermen or just farmer or doing something else to make their living. And now is more, they don't have that fresh air anymore. They are like in an open air prison, and is a different circumstances, and they are not very aware, like in terms of general Rohingya, but there are some people who are connected with network, or somehow they are working for any NGO, so they have sort of knowledge what's really happening about the lawsuit and with the ICJ, and sometimes they celebrate that the Gambia was helping, that Gambia was standing for them, so it goes viral in the refugee camp, so everybody knows that, but not really like knowing about law and the rights, not everybody, because I can't say about everybody, but maybe there are some changes now.
Yeah, no, and if there are any of the audience members has much more in-depth knowledge of humanitarian or international law, please feel free to actually share that knowledge on the chat. Paul also asked a related, I think, quite difficult question, which is, it's clear that it's unlikely they will be able to go back to Myanmar. If that is correct, which countries do you think that they will go, or do we have any idea? And just to put this in perspective, the statistic that actually shocked me was to learn that there were almost 1 million refugees. And I looked up the population of New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale University is. There are 130,000 people in all of New Haven. So this is kind of like 8 times the population of New Haven. And New Haven is the 3rd largest city or town in Connecticut, in one of the states. So, so that just puts into perspective just how big it's not a question of a few hundred refugees. And I think very similar to other long-standing camps, whether it's Dadaab, etc., the question I think is, where would they go? Right? I understand they're stateless in that sense. They're not recognized as citizens. I think the big question is there any sort of update or understanding or negotiation about where they would go?
Okay, so I just followed some news, and there was a foreign minister of Bangladesh. He was trying to talk with China, with India, because this is also going to be a regional threat. What is happening? These refugee youngsters, they are growing up, and there's lots of children. I think it's a 30,000 children every year. Some there is an I forgot the exact number, but it's something like that. And so is what's really happening, and is going to be, if you're not providing education, if you're not providing any basic human rights, and everything is getting like more smaller, more worse, then they would get more desperate, and they will be used by other criminals, for example, especially for the drugs. And that area is very famous for the drugs dealing, because of the river, because of the sea. And there was something happening, and it's not just for the Bangladesh, but also is a regional threat for India, for Myanmar, for Bangladesh, for Thailand, for other countries who are sharing the same area. So, and that's why they have, like, all the government, they should really take necessary steps, of very like useful things, not just talking. And last on 25th or 24th of August, I was sharing a panel with a conversation with the foreign minister of Malaysia. He also said very like they are very welcoming to Rohingya refugee, but also already they have some people there, the Rohingya community, a big community of Rohingya. They are living in Malaysia. So far, what I talked to also in India, also in Indonesia, uh, there are few numbers, and I know some people who are living in US, but not that big amounts. It's not that effective.
Yeah.
What concern, I can't say like if that is correct, to what countries do you think they will go? I mean, they still prefer to go to Myanmar. They are just not refugees. They are a group of people with past, with honor, with culture, and now they lost everything, and
Yeah.
they're still saying that, like, the people, they are the people who are saying, like, we are just socializing, we feel like we have to feel like we are on holiday. That guy was after the interview, he was with full of tears, because he said, I had too many Honda motorbikes, and I was very rich person, I was very respected person, now I have nothing to do, I lost everything.
And
So
I think,
yeah, yeah,
sorry,
sorry,
I
yeah.
just wanted, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to say that I don't think we often realize that refugees in humanitarian camps can't work. They're not allowed to work. So this is not like a migration scenario where people go to another country and they can
Yeah.
work. Even
Mm-hmm.
now, I think the government is deciding whether they can work, and I think you referred to it in the drug violence. And again, the way people are coping with it is to say, we are here on a holiday, we are socializing, but in addition to income, there's also a loss of identity. If people get a lot of their meaning in life from working, and if they just can't work, they can obviously get desperate for income, but also a lot of their sense of what it means to be a useful person in society, because that's the way we've always talked about people, right? That you should work for a living, and when you can't do that, there are a lot of issues that I think will come to the fore. You're completely right in terms of these effects of violence and other sort of abuses, because people are just not allowed to work. I mean, imagine if any of us were told tomorrow. I think we'd be happy for maybe a day or two, and then we'd start getting restless. So imagine when you're told for long periods of time that your status is so uncertain, not allowed to work. So yeah, I think when I heard that person talking, you could very clearly see that he wasn't saying it very joyfully. He was almost saying
Mm-hmm.
it in a very resigned fashion. What can we
Mm-hmm.
do? We can socialize here.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good question is, that comes up is, And this is a tricky question, right? Because again, this is very different from chronic poverty in that people need to know information about their rights. And a lot of people in the documentary also talked about their rights. They talked about, getting back their rights. So do the NGOs that help in the Rohingya and the camps disseminate information about rights, or do they support them on more of the healthcare and other basic necessities? Do you see more of, I know, the humanitarian agencies have set up and there are different areas that they help in, education, healthcare. Is there a way that there are people are educated about their rights, or you think that's not yet happening in the camps?
Well, so far I know, with my little knowledge, I think there are some organizations who are working for that, but this is not really enough for this. And all formal schools are closed, so there is no even school. So it's getting, because Bangladesh has this. What I learned, they are saying like is a refugee camp. We can't give them like a home, like giving the education and everything, so they will stay longer. They would not go back home. So that's what I realized through the different kind of explanation from different corner. But what I feel is very important to let them know their basic rights, information about health, about the birth control, and because it's also like really happening. And they said like if God creates, there are also misconceptions because because of the lack of knowledge, they depend on something like spiritual power, something like gods, like these mostly they are devoted to the religion, but at the same time they have no any kind of material or any other education. I'm please don't get offended, other people, who I'm not against religion, but I'm saying that because they have a way, they have a saying that, oh, okay, if God creates the children, God will take care of that. So but at the end of the day, you have to go, you have to ask for food for your children. You can't just, this is something they have misconception about so many things, about way of living, about their health, the other system, other disease is also. And I think, yeah, of course, the government, Bangladesh government, at the same time, some other NGO or the organization, they should take care of it more.
Sorry, I was on mute. There's a good point to think about, which is that it's not just about providing the health and the basic necessities, but again, as we talked about work is not just about the money that you get. It's also your chance to be a sort of productive member of the society. So it contributes to your identity. Similarly, it's not only about giving people healthcare and basic necessities, but also telling people about their rights, right? Treating them like equal human beings and really sort of recognizing their dignity even in this situation. So it's a really important. Sometimes we can forget that when we are so, as the, all of us who are in service of the folks, and forget it because we think, oh, if we give people help, then that's enough. But we forget that people are people. We are full human beings. We want our dignity to be affirmed, whatever we do, and that is the ability to work, the ability to have freedom, to move, to know our rights, to fight for our rights. And however people might say, well, why don't you compromise or adjust? If I feel very strongly, I should be allowed to express that. So I think that came up a little bit because I was surprised, not surprised, but I think it was really reflective that despite all of what they've seen, they still talked about, we want our rights. We want to go back and we want our rights. Otherwise, there's no point in going back. So they were not prepared to just go back, just like that. They said only if our full rights are restored to us. Cici had a question about what the mother was doing while the kids sold ice cream. Do you know? For the kids were selling. And she had a younger. She mentioned a younger child. Was there a younger child also? I don't think we saw the younger child, but she mentioned towards the end. I wasn't sure.
Okay, so I was also wondering what she was really doing, and then I asked her, but she said she takes care of them, and she tried to get some work, but she didn't get any work. So she completely depends on the income of her kids earning every day. So and she takes care of other children. You see, like one, two, three, four of them, and she has more kids, two more,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they are not there. So yeah, I mean, is most of the women they are like that in
And
the camp.
and I think again, it's another thing when we talk about setting up refugee camps. It's not as simple as giving people some housing and giving them some food. What happens is societal inequalities sort of
Hmm.
also the same thing happens, right? So uh, if if women have not been used to sort of earning their own living or doing something, or people are not used to employing them, they're not going to employ them in just because it's now a refugee camp. So we've got to
Yeah.
think about what were they doing before, what are people's social norms about what women can and can't do, and what needs to be done. And in this context, I want to say that uh, at YRISE we're conducting some research in Cox's Bazar with the World Bank and other institutions, and one of the things is to understand violence against women. Understand. Someone talked about. I think Aisha talked about how inequalities impact children's life. I think we're trying to understand how such conditions impact things like violence against women, which is, is it worse? Is it better because everyone's now in a shared situation? Is it worse because there's so much frustration? Has it become worse as people are there for a longer time? Because if you have to do, is it different from, violence against women in chronic poverty situations, or there's something about this particular situation that's different? Because only if we understand that, we can understand, what's happening. I
Hmm.
do want to encourage the audience to post any more questions in the Q&A, and also maybe in terms of at least my final question, maybe to Sohail, but also to the audience, which is, as a filmmaker, what's your expectation of what centers of learning like Yale and the university can actually do in this giant problem? We are not governments, and we are not
Hmm.
NGOs who are directly going to be there, but there is a role that universities can actually play, in maybe getting attention to these atrocities. And what do you see as sort of the role? And very similar, I guess, what's your role as a filmmaker, in highlighting some of these things so that others have awareness of it?
Okay, so let's see if there is some audience that says
I would
something,
love some
and
audience reactions. What do you
please,
think
yeah.
is the role of universities like
So,
Yale in terms of this? You can put it in the Q&A, and I'll just pick it
mhm.
up from there. But what do you think is the role of universities in humanitarian crises like this? What can we do?
uh, is I can't tell you like what you should do, but I can tell you my expectation.
Yes.
Like maybe you are the right person. What you can do, you can tell about these from the university perspective or from the academic perspective. But like if you go with the anthropology, like Malinowski, who went to for the field work, so he brought something we didn't know, but then we started from this armchair anthropology, then it breaks, then this. But I'm saying a kind of university, a center, a research center, a university, if they talk about this, it means a lot for them. For example, right now is there are people engagement. We are talking, you are talking, so is already a lot for these one of the most persecuted communities in the world, and they are like almost international community has forgotten about them. And now a university is one of the top most university in the world, Yale, and I'm really grateful and thankful to you, to the university that invited my film and screening for the big audience, especially for the academic world. And I think it has a significant impact, especially for making the awareness, and also is for the future and future people. will know that, and it will help to prevent another genocide in another corner of the world. If
And I
we
think,
talk
yeah,
about this, if we have some research why it's happening, what should we do, and some suggestion, some writing, some films, more reviews, more things. So it's, I think everybody, whatever we have the ability, we should talk about this, we should go for this, we should do anything. So that's what I feel as a filmmaker. Maybe I'm not, I just tried a little contribution. It's not, but what I'd be happy to see someday, that's there are lots of people that said, wow, this is something what we needed to see. In France, it was in-person screening in France, in Toulouse. When I screened the film, and some people had to leave because they couldn't digest, they couldn't continue because it's too much for them. And then some people just came to me and just gave me a hug and started crying and saying, "Oh my God, we didn't have any idea what's happening in that corner of the world. We just saw some news and that's it." So because the medium like newspaper or the television or journalistic work, I appreciate lots of great journalists. They went there, they did a great journalism, the picture they portrayed, the sufferings and everything, but still they have somehow, they are not free. There is always like editorial policy of the newspaper, always a policy. So university, in terms of university, they have this freedom of research, they have this freedom of raising the voice in an authentic way, honest and genuinely. And then I think the university, more university, I'm so grateful to some other universities. They also invited me, almost now 15 universities around the world. They invited me with this film. And I'm looking forward to the US trip where I'm going to screen my film in UCLA, NYU, and USC, Berkeley. And there are lots of universities we are talking like every day. So that's what as a filmmaker, with this film, I would like to tell this story to the world and to feel it, not just giving the information, but to feel and to fly with this pain. That's what I want.
And I think you
To be part of the journey. Yes.
thank you. I think that um, there is one more question, but I just want to make a note about the role of university. So we talked a little bit about, the label of genocide and when that label is applied and when it's not applied. And it might just seem that, oh, we are sitting here, in our comfortable studies and libraries and universities and offices and deciding whether to call something. But I think labels provide legitimacy, and universities do the same thing, which I hear you saying. They provide a platform, they provide a legitimacy to say this is real, this is important, this is something we should pay attention to. And I think that makes a lot of, that makes a lot in terms of moving world opinion forward. I also think your point about freedom of research is extremely important. Universities have freedom to research things that, that might be uncomfortable but need to be actually revealed. So it's a very, I think, important and quite, awe-inspiring responsibility that we do have as a university. You've made the film, you've really touched the hearts of people, you've brought out the reality. As a filmmaker, you've made this reality vivid to people. Also, universities are engaged in teaching young people. I think, what do we do to avoid the next such atrocity? What have we learned? And I think in the light of discussions about the liberal arts and learning from history, I think it really is important to think about the role of centers of learning in something about this. And there's one more question actually that we had about the film from CC. She said, I noticed that you only shoot the upper body of the man who lost his legs. It seems that you don't want to sell miseries, and you talked
Exactly.
a little bit about. Can you tell us a bit about your thinking process of making that shot? And even I realized that, and I was like, wait a minute, he doesn't have, his legs were short. I mean, he looks from the angle that you shot him, he looks actually quite healthy and very well to do. Can you tell us a little bit about the thinking process in terms of making that making the shot?
Well, there are several shots like that, and then I always try to deal it with respect, with the compassion, with the respect, and I really felt it. It's not just for the cinematic journey, but also as a person. And I didn't, as I'm saying, even I was having problem if I should put the mother crying. Then finally I choose to keep it in the film. And there are other more horrible shots, like really is too much. That's why for the international audience, maybe the people who already saw there is usual for them, and for even some people will say, oh, this is nothing. If they see my film, they will say, oh, this is nothing in terms of what's really happening to them. So I tried to have these people, and in my framing, I was following mostly observational. So, and then is I'm grateful to all those people who allow me to film them. And I also didn't really want to embarrass them in terms of doing something, and I didn't want to take disadvantages. Maybe in cinematic way it could be great, but I left in some shots because
I
it
think,
doesn't work in terms of ethics, in terms of
correct.
aesthetic. So I tried to make like that way. And then of course, as I'm saying, it's a very tough, it's hard work, it's very dark at the same time. It's a pain, it's a tragedy, it's a loss. Then how can I deal it at the for a long time? It took long time in terms of editing, but also in terms of when I was filming every day. And I tried to be very respectful and passionate and to them, and they understand it. Because if you see all the people who were talking to the camera or talking to me, you see their eyes, and those eyes, they can't lie. If you see their eyes, so it's then I tried to make these eyes to the audience, to see their eyes. As there was, I was reading a review, an article from the Myanmar perspective, and they said, "Oh, they're lying. Those people are lying. Those are just the false statement." And that was really like, no, come on, how come these people can lie with me? And they're with full of tears, with that old man, the old man who were like two men who were sitting together. The
Yes.
beard man. He looks like I lost my father. I found like as another father of me. And when he was talking, he lost everything, but the way, the words, the choice of his words, intonation, and everything was so respectful, so humble, and also it shows his personality. And he lost everything, but still the guy is a quite controlled. And I was really amazed. Oh my God, these people are how they can bear this wound inside them.
No, and I
So
think that
too
it's
much.
a no, it's a great point you raised about how do you depict suffering without sort of exploiting people's suffering. There's been a lot of backlash in the NGO world around what is called poverty porn, which is depicting people in
Yeah.
extreme suffering. And it really is a difficult choice. On the one hand, you do want to show that, you don't want to sugarcoat reality, but on the other hand, both from the perspective of sort of keeping people's agency, and also what Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie talked, the danger of a single story. These people are people who have fled their homes, and they are they are now refugees in a camp. But that's not only who they are. They are also children. They're also ice cream sellers. They're also balloon sellers. They're also So I think you've done a great job in sort of not just focusing on only all of the suffering or trying to exploit that. I think it's a very fine line that any film. So, I thought that was very well done. That was
thank you, Neela.
Thank you. And yes, as Sriza said, the role of the university with the help of filmmakers is to show what is happening, to document what is actually happening, but to document it, as I said, not just in a way that shows only one story or one part, it's all only suffering, but to show the full reality of what is happening, right? How human beings cope in such situations, the good, the bad, so that we can have sort of a better response. I'm going to throw it open if there are other questions that our audience has. or comments, and then maybe ask your final sort of question, Sohail, in terms of anything else that you would like to say, given that you have this time, and this will be shown not just to the audience right now, but to the broader audience. I think Kathy had a question, which is, oh yes, this was an interesting one. Have you been able to screen the film at the camp itself? Were you able to go back and and also my add-on question to that is, have you been able to share the responses to the film with the people who were in the film?
Yeah, well, unfortunately not yet, but I would love to do that and tried. And now next year I'm planning to go there and to screen the film, and maybe I will follow up. I will make another film. What's really happening after the 5 years? Where is Ayas and Asia? And I have to find them because I lost their track since the mobile, because I was only medium was mobile, so I was getting touch, and then I lost them. Now I would really love to show the film to them, and also having the feedback what they really love. But what I can tell you, when I was showing, I was filming every day, and then at the end of the day, all the kids, they become like my friends, and they follow me. And then I was showing them from my camera, like, hey, look how you look like. And then, oh, show me more. Okay, it's funny. It's a pleasant. It's so nice. I can't forget that memory.
That's great, and I hope you have a chance to to actually show this more widely, even to those who are actually in the camp. I think another question that was asked was, as a documentary filmmaker, and I think this is a little bit of what we are discussing, like, how do you balance the telling of the stories while trying to be considerate of not bringing out any trauma? So we talked about, not exploiting people, but also just having people relate their trauma can be triggering for them. I think of the mother who lost her son and the child who was talking about how things would be better when his father was back. So how do you deal with the situation of asking people to recount their trauma, but also sort of playing that balancing role with making sure that you don't bring out any more trauma?
So it's a very significant question. That's how I'm trying to evolve. I'm trying to improve myself as a filmmaker. It's not just with the Rohingya, but if you look my other works, like I did with the two Portuguese shepherd ladies, shepherd women. They are 85 and 87 years old. They work in the middle of nowhere. I'm a guy from Bangladesh, and they have never heard about the country, and they have no idea where is Bangladesh is. It's something like for them is a different planet, like a moon or sun or something like that. So they have a tragedy. The women, the shepherd lady, Idalina, I call her grandma, and she lost her husband. He was also shepherd by a car crash. And the guy who made the car crash, he is asking money for the damage of his car. Wow. It is such a trauma, and she moved from one city to other city to work, and she was living with her husband, and they were okay with shepherd, with animals and everything. But then she has to carry this trauma, losing her husband, and then is another pain that someone is knocking the door asking the money for the damage of his car. I asked, like, okay, I know this is the film, but I have to deal it with very, very smoothly, very tenderly. And then we found, I didn't want her, she was crying. She was like, because with my Portuguese back then, my Portuguese was not good, but I was doing my master's in 2012 and 14. Came from Belgium, then to do this. Then it was, because what I try to do is I try to let them know myself and explore, like, okay, there is a universal language. There is an access, a kind of unwritten a bond between filmmaker and the character, especially when you are doing a creative documentary. So because if the character, if the people who we are filming, if they have some confusion, if they don't trust you, you would never get you would never get a genuine story, and you would never it's not impossible to make a good film in terms of that. So the trauma is always like when we deal this pain, and normally my films comes from pain. My films mostly like tragedy, loss, pain, and all this kind of work is, I don't know how it's, I go with this kind of film, and I get inspired and I make it. And so with this grandma, she was, I just, I just gave her a situation to unfold, to reveal what's really her universe is. And then she started revealing naturally, without just asking how your husband got killed and how it was happened, and did you, were you very sad? And no, I didn't ask anything. I just let her talk. And all those people, when I was filming in the camp, in the refugee camp, I just said, how are you? How is your day? How do you feel? What are you thinking? So it started from very simple question, and then it's connect, it linked with something else. And then when it comes out, and either they smile or they cry, or they're just normal. And there is one woman, she was saying she was pregnant, and then I put in one version of the film, she was pregnant, and I was asking her, what are you doing? She asked me to film her and her child inside her. And she said, are you excited? Yes, I'm excited. And then, where is his father? He was slaughtered. So the way she was responding is like telling that she had a breakfast or something. You know how these people, this mental trauma, these laws, this tragedy made these people like this level of like kind of, they lost everything. They are no more human. They are not sick, but is they live in different level of I can't explain properly with my words. But for me, the film is good for to explain the things. And then this is how I normally handle. And sorry that can I read the acting?
Yeah, no, it was really about balancing the,
Oh,
this
okay,
this
okay, okay.
balancing act that you
So,
have to make as the filmmaker between telling the story and sort of
okay,
triggering the trauma when people are telling you the story.
yes. So that's, then we go with the like when we have food, what we see, like we don't go for everything at the same time. So we have like we choose our choice, our taste. So in the same thing, if I could put, I could put all kind of injury, wounds, and more suffering, more things, it would not be accepted as it is now.
Yeah.
It would not touch a big community. It would not touch like, okay, this is maybe it could touch, but it's
Okay.
then it's like you will understand, okay, this filmmaker is just trying to make me sad.
Yeah.
But that's not my view. That's not what I'm trying to see, trying to do.
And I do want to add one more thing, which is I think that we need to make sure that we treat people's responses in the situation as precious, right? And that's why it's important that you've taken the trouble to build that trust. You talked about trust, which takes a long time to build, and ask them questions, very vulnerable questions. And it's our responsibility then to share it as widely as possible, so we don't have 50 people all descending on the camp with the same idea and keeping on asking the same questions over and over again. I think that if we have people who are going in and who are sort of building trust with the communities there and who are asking these questions and getting responses, I think we should, our responsibility is to share that information as much as possible. And I do want to say, for example, at Wide Eyes, I mentioned this a little bit, but we are doing some research, collecting data around consumption and among other things, and starting out with, things like what is the extent of violence against women, but also maybe looking at other questions, so on. And one of the things we want to do is we're going to be in the data collection process in October, November, have the data early next year and share that data widely, so that we don't have a constant stream of researchers who are going in there and saying, oh, I must ask my question. Because this is a particular case where you can't keep asking people 100 times over and over again. It's not just that people will get tired, it's also that people don't want to keep talking about the trauma over and over again. So we should be respectful. And I think one of our big duties is to make sure that we are not duplicating research or storytelling, so that we are respectful of people's sort of time and what they're going through when they provide answers to these questions. So I'm glad you mentioned trust. It's a very long process, and we just want to make sure that others don't do that. And that was a wonderful story very sad about the Portuguese lady as well. So I guess you probably have some expertise, I want to say, or some experience in these situations. And again, I think the other main lesson I'm getting from you is, in these difficult situations, it's always good to have somebody who has experience in these situations. I think if we just go in as just researchers or filmmakers who don't know anything about the situation, never worked in similar situations, we are likely to cause more harm than to do good. So I think it's worth it for us to actually think about that. But I echo CC, who said that I learned so much from Sohel and the Rohingya people. I did too. Just watching this documentary for an hour and 15 minutes, I think I learned more than reading everything. And really, it really sank in a way that I can read any news article or whatever proclamation, but this really brings it home. And also to thank you for the chance to let us witness the stories. I'm going to actually just call on Teresa Delgado, who's the head of the refugee program at Macmillan, to say a few words, because I think this is thanks to, it was organized through the program, the refugee program at Macmillan, and this is one of the many things that the center does. So Teresa, if I can have you just say a few words, and then I'll close this. And thank you so much too. I hope I've answered. If I haven't answered any, or if Sohel hasn't answered any audience questions, I haven't had a chance to ask him. Can you just copy it so that I know that we haven't answered it? But I think we have gone through all. And thank you for being such an engaged audience. Teresa?
Yeah, no, I just want as well to thank everybody for participating in this session. And for us, we see the role that we have as mainly sort of giving the opportunity to people to see and share the experiences of others. Of the refugee, of people who have no voice. So actually we see this as a platform. And given that we are here at Yale, I think our role is just to, engage with programs as well as like the Y-Rise in terms of the research that can be done, but balancing also with the other type of dissemination, let's say, of showing, all of what Sohel was talking about, the empathy, I guess, in order to relate to the refugees and give them the rights that have been taken aback. So hope you can continue to participate and to watch the seminars and films, and if you have any suggestions, please do write to us. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa. I think the program on refugees does a huge job in terms of making these stories accessible, and I agree with you. I think that the stories that Sohel and other filmmakers and storytellers talk about is just as valuable when we say data as the kind of hard data or quantitative data that we might do as an academic research center. I think if you want to move people, you've got to show them not just the numbers, but also the stories of people's lives. So I think this is a fantastic. And to those on today who are present today, I think there's a link to see the film. We'd request that you not share it widely right now because I think it's still being shown. But yes, we hope that you do have a chance to catch up with this fantastic film. So thank you to everyone, to the Yale Macmillan Center Program on Refugees for bringing this, for Sohel, of course, for the courage and the patience and it requires, and the resilience, and most of all, of course, if you ever get a chance to speak with the children and with others in the camp, to tell them like how moved we were by the stories, and to wish them well, actually.